Welcome to the Miscellaneous Film Festival podcast, the show for curiously curated films. My name is Jacin.
And I'm Dustin.
And this is part 5 of our Shakespeare mini film festival, where we're discussing Akira Kurosawa's 1985 masterpiece, Ron, which is in part an adaptation of Shakespeare's King Lear.
Okay, so Jacin, I picked this movie as well as the Tragedy of Macbeth. You called it a masterpiece. Had you seen it prior to this show that we prepared for?
I am ashamed to say I had not. This is one of those movies that when people talk about Akira Kurosawa, they mention this title in the same breath. It's like Ron, Rashomon, The Fortress, and Yojimbo.
And Seven Samurai, too.
I feel bad again that I forgot to mention Seven Samurai. That is actually one of my favorite movies.
It is really great.
It's such a good movie.
It's so awesome. All of those movies are masterpieces.
Last week we talked about Joel Coen's The Tragedy of Macbeth from just a few years ago, really speaking about its unique visual style. Ron also is a visual masterpiece, given his portrayals of the Japanese landscape, his use of authentic ancient castles, and the color palette he brings to it to kind of explain everything.
Yeah, the color palette in this movie. So for those who may not know, Kurosawa, super famous director, made a ton of really great movies that Jacin just listed, but all of those are black and white. And it's really interesting to watch a director who kind of cut his teeth making black and white masterpieces, and then he moves into color. Mm-hmm. This movie is from 85, I think, and That's right. is absolutely stunning. His choice of color palette, everything pops, but not in an obnoxious way. Like, it's really beautiful. And it also helps with the storytelling, too, because of the different factions that are at work here in the story.
Right, the basic story taken from King Lear, but also from Japanese history. The sort of two stories he was working with that kind of coincided for him to make this original piece is about a king who has become very, very old and feels the need to step down and decides to split his kingdom between his 3 daughters in the original play by Shakespeare, King Lear. But in this movie, it's 3 sons. And so King Hidetora says that he wants to more or less retain his status as the chief, the head of the country, but only in title. And it will be his eldest son who will run everything.
Yes.
And that's where our story kind of kicks off about the actual intentions and feelings of his sons.
Yes. And in true Shakespeare understanding human nature fashion, if anyone has ever lost a loved one, particularly an elder member of the family, and then everyone comes out of the woodwork to take all their shit and fight over the will and all the possessions and properties, King Lear is that is the modern version of King Lear, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I've been through this with multiple members of my family, and I'm sure that will resonate with some of the audience as well. But King Lear is all about the chaos of what happens when the figurehead of the family cedes power.
Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't die, he just knows he's going into decline, and we meet him probably at the last height of his faculties before he slowly starts going mad.
Yeah. He has this notion, and it's a beautiful one, but it ends up being wrong, that the 3 sons, if working together, will be stronger than the sum of their parts.
Which is a great visual metaphor for that.
Yes, they're given arrows, and they are told to snap them in half when they're told that the kingdom will be divided amongst them. They each break their arrows, but then he gives them 3, and they try to break it, and they can't. That being said, this doesn't work. It's because the king, I think, he's old enough, and I think he's kind of romanticizing that his sons will be like him. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't take into account the differing motivations and passions and incentives that the 3 sons are going to face. So they immediately start squabbling. And he's also essentially thrown out of house and home. And he essentially gets to watch his kingdom be destroyed from the inside by his 3 sons, who are all corrupt, with the exception of his youngest son, Saburo, who is really the only virtuous son, I would say, maybe even virtuous character throughout the whole movie. He's the one that sees this happening, or he's the one that predicts this is going to turn out badly. And for going against his father's wishes, he gets thrown out and doesn't even get part of the kingdom.
Banished. Yeah.
Right. He gets banished. So we set in motion kind of all these moving pieces. This is definitely an epic. I think it's best seen in one sitting, but it is an epic. And
I agree.
And maybe even reading like the Cliff Notes or the GPT version of the Cliff Notes of King Lear is a good idea before getting into this movie, because there are a lot of moving parts.
At the heart of the movie and the themes that it explores, there is a lot of crossover between Shakespeare's original play and what you'd expect from a Japanese epic, including the idea of the importance of the individual over the integrity of a nation or a family, of the group as a whole, which is illustrated through the breaking of the arrows, and coincidentally illustrated through the loss of integrity within the Lear character, Hidetora himself, as he witnesses his sons going to war against each other, as the integrity of the country is falling apart, as he is also falling apart.
Yes. He essentially goes mad over a broken heart, I would say, right? Is that your interpretation?
Brokenhearted is a good way to say that.
Yeah. There's an amazing scene where his castle is being sieged by his eldest son, and he's in a tower that's got flaming arrows being shot at it, and he's just kind of sitting there on the ground as it's burning around him. And he's
the most epic recreation of the "this is fine" meme.
Yes, yeah, like he's completely just broken at that point. And this isn't even at the halfway point, so he still has a long mission ahead of himself, or a long journey. But in a tragic way too, he does end up escaping with his life, but essentially all of the loyal men that he had are killed in this attack on the castle. He leaves, accompanied by a character that would have been the fool in the Shakespeare play.
Which in Shakespeare was kind of a minor character, but Kurosawa really brought that character to the forefront to be someone as a counterpoint to Lear, a fool who had been one of his servants, someone who was easily written off, now with no one left becomes Lear's caretaker.
Right. And because the fool's whole not entire, but one of the roles of the fool is kind of that of court jester, right? To entertain the king. So he actually understands a lot about the king and his taste and psychology. He also understands that the king is a tyrant. And once the king escapes from the siege, he actually becomes more reflective. And in a tragic turn of events, at least psychologically for him, I think he begins to realize that he's not actually some great noble king. He actually built his kingdom on bloodshed and conquest. And his sons
are continuing that tragic part of his legacy.
Yes, and it like almost all of the quote legitimacy of his rule has been by might or by force. And of course, feudal Japan, that's like there's no stranger to that when it comes to whoever the ruling shogun or king would have been. So, it's a wonderfully introspective take on King Lear, I think.
Yeah, and this takes place during the Sengoku period, which was just before the Tokugawa shogunate. Japan had been a collection of feudal states. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, all that was kind of brought together and unified through authoritarian power.
Right.
So the idea of a warlord taking over neighboring territories was exactly what was going on.
Right. It would have been very familiar.
And then within the single family, different brothers, in this case, fighting amongst themselves also makes sense.
Yeah.
Similar things happening in Europe when Shakespeare was writing this.
Yes. And Kurosawa, he was already not a stranger to Shakespeare. Throne of Blood is his adaptation of Macbeth, and The Bad Sleep Well is his adaptation of Hamlet. So he already had all of this kind of, I think, under his nails. And I really, I love Seven Samurai. That's one of my favorite movies. But I think Ron is actually Kurosawa's masterpiece. And just taken as a whole, there are individual moments in Seven Samurai that are better, at least for me. But there's a consistency and a maturity in Ron that I really, really like in Kurosawa. And he himself was an older director at this time, so I think he himself is being quite reflective, and he's really able to channel that. the lead that plays the king in this is Tatsuo Nakadai, and he is so great, and he's in this incredible kind of exaggerated old age makeup, and it totally works for me. And yeah, so much of the movie, a lot of it features the two older sons, and they're kind of vying for power with each other and becoming corrupted. And that stuff's wonderful, but I love the stuff that really focuses on the king himself and kind of him tragically reflecting on, he kind of has a sham legacy. It's so much of it's built on blood, right? And not on, like, it's, you know, he didn't start a small business and then become, you know, a company that was satisfying its customers. He was just killing everybody to establish his kingdom.
Right. One of the corrupting factors that both the older and middle brothers run into, as the older brother, Taro, is married to a woman who is very much like a Lady Macbeth character. She's referred to as Lady Kaede, who is played by Meiko Harada. And Meiko Harada I do not know how to describe this, but she bursts off the stage in such a visceral way.
She's the standout performer in this.
So much of what she does, being a feudal period queen or lady, she is demure, she is deferential, but then when she speaks or when she decides to assert her agenda, she is indomitable and crushes anyone in her wake.
Yes, she cuts like a knife with her speech. It's great. And
with her speech and with a blade that she's hidden
that's true.
On her person.
And
she is deadly in everything she does.
Is her backstory that she is actually the daughter of one of the, I don't want to say agents, but one of the serfs or lords that was killed by the king?
The palace she lives in with the elder brother, who is her current husband, was the palace she lived in. I believe she was one of the children of the lord that lived there previously, who Hidetora had killed to claim that palace.
She has her own revenge motivation here, and she's playing within this power structure of the brothers struggling for their own power. It's pretty great, actually, because it's actually, I think, a decent kind of film that discusses political logic. Most political films, I think they're kind of naive in their interpretation of how the world works, but in this one, you get these different corners of people who are trying to grab onto as much power as possible, and they all have these kind of disparate motivations, so they clash all the time, and they have to make compromises and work in the shadows, and there's a lot of like backstabbing, and like at one point the two elder brothers make more or less a coalition against the younger brother, because the younger brother takes in the father near the end,
right?
And so I think that it's quite smart in its analysis of this stuff. And I know that King Lear is one of the later Shakespeare plays, and it really shows. Like, it's one of his best, like, I don't know, top 5 plays. And it really covers the thirst for power aspect of human nature, but also this reflective part too, right? Like, I don't know who painted this, but there's a painting, I think, from the Renaissance of Macbeth weeping at the feet of one of the daughters, or not Macbeth, sorry, King Lear, weeping at the feet of one of his daughters, and they're in prison together or something like that. And so it is absolutely a tragedy, but it's like a macro tragedy. You're dealing with like an entire nation and the ramifications of what happens when just a few key people do crazy shit.
And that's why I like that correlation between the integrity of the nation and the integrity of Lear himself, or Hidetora in this, and watching them fall apart at a personal and at a macro level.
Yes, and I think that it just really works for me. I love the performances. The standout ones, though, are the Fool, the Lady Macbeth character, and
Lady Kaede.
Thank you, and King Hidetora. Those are the 3 key performances in the movie, and
absolutely.
And Tatsuo Nakadai was in Yojimbo, so he has a long.
Who's he in Yojimbo?
He's the arch rival to the Mifune character with the gun. Right. Yeah. 20 years earlier, or I think more even, because what's Yojimbo, like 1960, 61? So
It's like that.
yeah. So, clearly he had worked with Kurosawa before, and they really knew how to work together. And yeah, I think this is one of the great epics. I'd put it alongside something like Lawrence of Arabia, and just in its scope and how well it's filmed.
Speaking of that, I kept being astonished, and delightfully so, by the battle scenes.
Yeah.
One criticism I have for a lot of modern movies, especially Disney movies, is when good guys and bad guys fight, there's always this, let's go to the vast open field.
Right.
Where our massive army and their massive army can just run at each other, and we get this big old war scene, and it's just overwhelming, a widescreen shot. With this,
and it's a CGI nightmare usually too.
Well, exactly, a CGI nightmare. And this, while it may have been a practical nightmare to put all the pieces together, moving parts, make sure that the continuity is right, because this is done before CGI, the epic scale of the battles, with all practical effect, with all these soldiers in all these amazing suits of armor that are color-coded to the different brothers' armies, storming against one another, it is glorious.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And to the benefit of that, you can sit back and say, and this all really happened, or was all really performed by real actors.
There's also amazing, now this is a Japanese thing, but there are amazing blood effects in this movie. It's not particularly gory. It's actually quite stylish, and it works with the tragedy, I think, pretty well too. Whereas a movie like Kill Bill, it's for fun. But
yeah, for Kill Bill, they're going for maximum squirt.
Right.
And this is more refined squirt.
Yes, yes, and and yeah, the battle scenes are awesome. All of the wardrobe is awesome in this movie too. And
oh my goodness! Yeah, the costumes are amazing.
Yes, and the color of the costumes really amplifies that too. And
so
something
many details. The pattern works. They were done by Emi Wada, who actually won an Academy Award for Best Costume Design for this film.
That's deserved.
If you look at historical films to see the quality of their costumes, this is one that you will absolutely love.
Yes, and it's a visual feast. I actually can't believe I haven't mentioned this. The score for this movie was composed by Toru Takemitsu, and he's, I would say, one of the greatest post-war, that's post-World War II, composers in classical music. Heavily influenced by Debussy, and came up with his own style. And he mixed traditional Japanese instruments with Western orchestra and notation. So really incredible composer. He was working essentially from the 50s to the 90s when he passed away. And for anyone who's interested in the score for this movie, they should totally give it a listen in isolation. It's really pretty amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And other key pieces by Takemitsu, for those who are interested, would be From Me Flows What You Call Time and November Steps. I think those are excellent pieces to get into.
I think it'd be great to do another mini film festival just on films with his scoring in them.
That'd be cool. I actually don't know of the others, to be honest. I think there are mostly Japanese movies that I haven't seen. But something where we talk about scores in particular would be amazing. We could pick 30 movies and have a great time. But we could have like 6 podcasts about scores because they're just so incredible.
Well, we'll have to narrow it down a little bit. But no.
Yeah, so the music for this movie is incredible, and it doesn't have that. There's a lot of epics like this that were out in the 60s and the late 50s, like Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments or Cleopatra. The scores for those movies, outside of Lawrence of Arabia, are mostly not great. They kind of smell of white hat, black hat Western movies and the orchestra scores that they all had. Mostly, I find that stuff to be just kind of plain. This one, there's a lot of darkness in the score, and it's not bombastic, so there's a kind of broodingness to it that is just so appropriate for this kind of story. So, yeah, I think it's got a score and a visual style that completely support the themes. The performances are great, and
the direction is outstanding.
The direction's amazing, and I think it's Kurosawa's masterpiece. And I mean, Kurosawa is one of the few directors you can say has like more than 5 movies that could be called a masterpiece. Maybe 10 for him. There's not many other directors that can make that claim. You know, in the 5 category, what, like Kubrick, Spielberg, Scorsese, it's people that we know. And Kurosawa is one of them. So this movie is totally worth checking out. I'd say it's one of the best movies of, you know, the last 50 years.
And the reason it's included in our list on adaptations of William Shakespeare is just because of how profoundly amazing the movie is. As a Shakespeare fan, you might be a purist who is expecting to get Elizabethan poetry, who wants to hear Shakespeare's actual prose. But I can absolutely guarantee if you haven't seen this, if you can suspend that desire, the motivations and the action from King Lear are 100% in this movie.
Yeah, I think that anyone who's a purist, this movie hopefully will get you to admit that a Japanese director was one of the best interpreters of Shakespeare.
Thank you all for listening to our mini Shakespeare Film Festival. I imagine we'll be doing this again because there are just so many great adaptations on film of Shakespeare's work. My name's Jacin.
And I'm Dustin.
And we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.